And with us right now, we've got Steve Olsher. Steve, you're the founder of Podcast Magazine. You don't become the founder of Podcast Magazine without being in the industry for some time. So first off, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me.
Well, so give me a quick background on how you got into podcasting and some of your accomplishments in the podcasting realm.
You know, it's interesting. I love the medium. Radio has always kind of been a holy grail for me. And used to DJ in clubs and had a radio gig when I was, way back when in college in the early 20s, those sort of days. And always loved everything about radio. And I felt like if I could get a syndicated radio show, like that would be the holy grail. And man, it was hard, right, to break into radio being in Chicago, which is where I was born and raised. And trying to get a gig there was really, really hard. So I started looking at some of these AM stations and whatnot, lots of AM stations. Then you could buy broker time and this, that, and the other. So I did that for a minute. And then I realized that, number one, I'm paying for the time. Number two, it's a small channel in a huge market. No one's really listening to this thing. A few people here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. And it was around 2009 or so that I realized, you know what? I've heard about this podcasting thing. I know it's out there. I've listened to a couple of them, but it was really hard to get those podcasts. You had to put them into a catcher and then download the file and then put it in another thing. And it was like 6 steps to listen to a show. But technology was starting at that point to kind of catch up with demand a little bit. And I was like, you know what? Let me see what I can do about launching a podcast here. And so that was really my first foray into the world of podcasting as a podcast host, launching my first show, which is called Reinvention Radio, which we still do to this day. And what I loved about it was, with the podcast, you can reach pretty much anyone, anywhere, at any time. And so radio, it's like you're just limited by the signal and who's listening at that particular moment. Podcasting, evergreen, lives on forever. And so I just really started embracing this whole podcasting is really the new broadcasting type of mentality. And that was when I started jumping in pretty hard into the mix. Now I took a little time off, came back, a little time off, came back. But really since 2015 now, I've been going full force into the mix, launched another new show called Beyond 8 Figures, where we sit down with entrepreneurs who have either exited for more than 10 million or currently run $10 million plus businesses. Started an event called the New Media Summit, where we bring in 150 people and 40 top podcasters. We give 150 people the opportunity to take center stage and pitch them. And they literally get booked on the spot on those 40 shows. And then Podcast Magazine, as you mentioned, is something that we're launching here in Q1 of 2020. And super, super stoked about that because it's for the fans, not for the podcasters.
Going back to Chicago, just simply because, I'm originally from West Michigan. So all of my heroes, we could hear AM radio from Chicago. So I was listening to WGN, WLS. Who were some of we'll geek out just a little bit here. Yeah. Who are some of your Chicago radio legends that inspired you? Now you don't go back to Larry Lujack days, do you?
Oh, sure I do. Absolutely. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, Larry
Super Jock.
Right. And the morning zoo type stuff on B96 and all that, but from an early really early age there, if I'm going to start pointing out people, I always loved Brandmeier's approach to stuff and what he did, and Steve Dahl's approach to what he was doing, and then they brought on Howard Stern on WCKG there, and so I always kind of like that whole shock jockey sort of in your face, let's have a real deal conversation here. Some of it was obnoxious, of course, but a lot of it was funny, and so Mancow then came on and did so much over the years there. And some people have likened what we do on Reinvention Radio to a little bit of me being sort of the Howard Stern of personal development, so to speak.
Well, I think what was revolutionary about it is that it was just much more honest and it was less programmed, but it was just much more authentic. It was just, hey, this is what I'm feeling. This is what's, it was less scripted than news and talk had ever been, I think I think that's really inspired what we have today in the podcasting world, what's, to your point, what's so amazing is that there's a low barrier to entry. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have an instant audience, that a radio station may be able to provide, but you can build that audience based on what I consider to be a true meritocracy.
Yeah. It truly, podcasting has truly leveled the playing field for all of us. And when you look at some of the top shows, not saying all the top shows, but when you look at some of the top shows right now in podcasting, what you'll see is a lot of unfamiliar names. And that's a good thing. I mean, certainly when you get Ron Burgundy, right, and you get Will Ferrell jumping into this space, and I mean, come on, he was on Jimmy Fallon, Colbert, and Jimmy Kimmel the same night. So he went across the country and filmed those segments on the three shows. He was on all three shows the same night when the Ron Burgundy show released season 2 of the podcast. I mean, so insane to be able to converge new media and old media there and get the type of visibility that he was able to get. That's not going to happen for us mere mortals. And Ron Burgundy, I mean, it's a cute little tidbitty show, whatever, I mean, like, but reality is when you look at somebody like a Rachel Hollis or a Jenna Kutcher or, any of those types of people that aren't household names, that don't have these celebrity, that aren't A-list celebrities, that don't already have millions of followers on other platforms, and yet are able to do some pretty impressive things in terms of getting into the charts and getting onto the radar of folks who had never heard them before solely by leveraging the power of podcasting. You can start to see how even us mere mortals, right, who don't necessarily have the benefit of all of that influence, of all of that authority, of all of that visibility that they're able to gain through other channels, we can still dance with a lot of these big boys and girls that frankly in no other medium are you able to do that.
Yeah. Let's talk about podcasts for business owners. So let's say that you have an existing brand. Maybe you're a traditional business owner, like you've got 50 employees, and you've been toying around with the format. You're kind of, certainly you've got a blog, you're doing some social media. How would someone know if they should add podcasting to their repertoire?
So it's a really interesting conversation from the standpoint of there's a lot of different ways to leverage the power of podcasting. Now, what we're seeing in terms of a 50 employee company versus a 50,000 employee company, there's a big difference there, of course. One of the things that we're starting to see a lot of the large organizations do is doing sort of what they might call and what you might call like a personal podcast, from the standpoint of it being an internal podcast where they can now communicate with their employees the world over through a podcast. So it's almost like a private podcast, if you will, just for that company, which is a great way to communicate with them. It's a great way to share, what's going on, what's new, what's now, what's next, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't look at it from the standpoint of building business. It's just an internal dialogue amongst the company to its employees. On the other side, if you are a business owner and you're looking to generate visibility, credibility, authority, and of course, highly targeted leads and revenue, there's no better platform on the planet right now than leveraging your own podcast, especially a very niche specific podcast. Let me give you an example here. So our company helps business owners, coaches, authors, speakers, solopreneurs, holistic practitioners, et cetera. We help them create their new media sales and marketing machines by launching their podcast, building their funnel, creating their online course, and again, really just creating this whole machine for them that creates visibility, leads, and revenue 24/7. Now, what we have found is that when you are launching your own show, the best thing for you to do is to get as niche as possible. Because when you think about a niche-oriented show, like let's say, for instance, a show called The Profitable Photographer, who do you think is going to listen to a show called The Profitable Photographer, Josh, right? I mean, obviously it's going to be someone who is a photographer and wants to elevate their photography business. So when our client Lucy Dumas decided to launch a show, we pushed her in that direction. Does it get thousands of downloads per episode? No. Does it need thousands of downloads per episode to add a pretty significant amount of income for her and her business month in and month out? Of course not, right? Because everyone who listens to The Profitable Photographer is raising their hand to say, I have an interest in photography. And no one is forcing it down their throat. It's a difference between push and pull media, right? So podcast is a pull medium from the standpoint of basically raising their hand to say, I want that. I want to hear that. And so it's kind of, I liken it to the equivalent of a 100% open rate on your email and a 100% click-through rate on your emails, which of course none of us have. Not if you've got more than 2 people on your email list, no one gets that. And so 100% of the people who are listening to the profitable photographer are raising their hand to say, this is of interest to me. So when Lucy turns around at the end of the episode and maybe she interviewed someone who's a profitable photographer and shares what they're doing, maybe she does a soapbox episode where she's just talking about a particular subject. When she turns around and she says, hey, if you want me to help you build a profitable photography business, well, grab a 15-minute let's chat type of session over here and let me see if I can help you. Well, he does that. People book those calls. Not everybody's going to be a fit. But for those who are, she's able to turn it into real revenue every single time.
You know, Steve, one thing that, and I've talked about this before, as someone who studied family science, I did a lot of research, and one of my big projects was on the debate versus quality versus quantity time. And, you know, just spending time in someone's vicinity is just so powerful. And I don't know of a medium that can command more of someone's time more easily than podcasting. You think about, you know, getting someone to spend a lot of time with you on Twitter, you forget it. It's not going to happen. Yeah. You know, everyone gets like a nanosecond on Twitter and all social media platforms for the most part. Yeah. You know, a blog, you know, maybe if I'm really wanting to research this and I really want to, you know, dig into whatever it is that I'm learning, maybe, you know, you might get a few minutes. Video can be good, but it's also very demanding because it demands all of the senses. But podcasts, I can listen to passively while I'm out walking my doggy Levi around the block. I'm taking a bike ride, I'm driving. And so I get the benefit of spending time together. Now, you as a podcast host, you know, you have people that have spent dozens of hours with you. And so if they get to know the problem that you solve, then who are they going to go to? They're always going to go to you because they know, like, and trust you because they've spent that much time with you.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, it's interesting because the average podcast interview is 62 minutes. So,
wow.
Yeah, 62 minutes. So, you know, what other medium, and your point is well taken. I mean, even a fairly long blog article, maybe, you know, and Medium does a really good job of this in terms of telling you how long it's going to take. You know, I mean, like Medium, it'll tell you if it's a 4-minute read or a 7-minute read or whatever it is, right? So maybe you get a handful of minutes. Like you said, social, you're doing the scroll, maybe you get 30 seconds. Video, you know, the odds of somebody sitting through something that's longer than just a few minutes is not very good unless they're watching a documentary or something of that nature. But I do think that's one of the reasons why podcasting is such a growing medium and will only continue to grow as Wi-Fi becomes a standard accessory in cars and Apple CarPlay and Google CarPlay becomes the dashboard, you know, that is standard in every vehicle and autonomous cars hit the road. And of course, you can do whatever you want to do as you go from point A to point B. Listenership's just going to continue to grow. And reality is, by some estimates anyway, you're going to see more than 1 billion people worldwide over the course of a month tuning into podcasts as soon as 2023 by many of the reports that I've seen.
Yeah. Do you think we've hit peak podcast? I think one of the challenges, you know, granted, I've been a podcast geek now for 9+ years. 11 years. So for me, you know, I think it's become very challenging. It's almost like I want to tell the podcasting world, stop making stuff. I got to catch up. But that's not going to happen. We have enough fuel for enough listeners. I would imagine globally for many, many, many years to come.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can simply ask this question, which is, how many people, from a percentage perspective, use a mobile device? How many people from a percentage perspective watch television? You know, and the God's honest truth is those are high 90 odd percentile. I mean, it's a huge number. And by some estimates, roughly 26% of those 12 and older here in the States listen to podcasts on a monthly basis. There is a tremendous amount of room to grow. And the reality is, there's about maybe 700,000 podcasts right now that are in existence, of which only about 140 to 150,000 of those are consistently launching and creating and creating new content and releasing new content. And so let's just say it's on the high end of that, and you have 150,000 shows that are releasing new content on a consistent basis. Well, if you compare that to the billions of websites, it's not even comparable. It's not even comparable. So even if you launched a show now or you started appearing on shows now, great, no better time than the present, because the reality is the odds of your being found either as a guest on a show or by launching your own show are exponentially greater than ever being found if you launch a website or start playing in that world as well. So, again, to each his own, but Josh, honestly, I think we're just still very much seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. Steve, what happens at New Media Summit?
New Media Summit's a lot of fun. First and foremost, we dance, we hang together, we eat. I mean, like, everybody's in one room. There's no VIPs. There's no, none of that. We're all together in one room over the course of 3 days. 200 people come in from across the globe. 40 of them are podcasters, top podcasters who have all sorts of different shows, business shows, spirituality shows, health and fitness, religious shows, you name it. We bring in top podcasters from across the globe as well. And 150 attendees have the opportunity to take center stage. Literally, it's the only event where every attendee takes center stage, at least an event of that size, takes center stage to pitch on who they are and what they do. And they get feedback from the podcasters, and they literally get booked on the spot. So it's 3 days of learning how to leverage and monetize the power of new media, developing real relationships with amazing people from across the globe, and getting booked on top podcasts on the spot. And we've got a 100% track record of people coming to the summit and leaving with bookings in hand. The average attendee actually gets booked on 12 to 14 shows.
That is really, when you consider the ROI on that, either from having to hustle and find those and work out those deals on your own and dealing with the rejections and all that, it's like it's kind of like a dating metaphor. It's like, listen, you can play the field or you could just show up at a dating mixer where everybody is there. The hosts are there to meet great guests. They've got a big audience already. The guests are there. And I can tell you, having been interviewed on 180 podcasts, it is life-changing. It is absolutely life-changing. And every week, I get people who say, I heard you on X podcast, and, in a venue where I got to teach for 30, 45 minutes or 60 minutes. And so they're already in love with me. By the time they get on the phone, they're ready to buy. They just wanted to say hi before they engaged with me. That's the real power. So, of course, you can find more information about New Media Summit. You go to newmediasummit.net. And that is coming up, Steve, looks like in March, right? March 2020?
Yeah, so March 2020 will be our 6th one, and that'll be in San Diego. And it's a rocking good time, man. We have people who actually go to, we've been told this, who have gone to events for years, and now they don't go anywhere else. We ruin events pretty much for you. So if you if you've been to other events, this one will ruin your event experience for anything else, because we set the bar really high in terms of the experience. And reality is, as I said, and as you said, the ROI of coming there and getting booked on the shows is huge. And of course, we do other things as well. We do pre-event training sessions to make sure that you're ready for the event. We teach you how to pitch. Our team builds your media one sheet for you, which, of course, the importance of that, Josh. So our team actually creates the media one sheet for you. And then there's other bonuses that we include as well. But, Yeah, man, it really is an experience like no other. And as I said, we have people who come in from across the globe to be there.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Steve Olsher, you're a New York Times bestselling author. You're a TEDx speaker, keynote speaker, legendary podcaster. You've been around the space for quite a while. And of course, you could be found at steveolsher.com. That's Steve, and Olsher is OLSHER.com, where you can find all kinds of things that Steve is doing. And of course, if you are interested in being a guest on top level podcasts, well, you can get it all done at one event, walk away with more than a dozen bookings, and that is at newmediasummit.net. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me on.